Hey, soul sister. Welcome to another episode of Midlife Love Out Loud. I'm so excited to have some more time with you and some time with Ajaya. I have Ajaya Sommers in the house. Hey, sister.
Hey, Junie. What an honor to be here with you.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. You live in Hawaii. Like you're there right now, right?
I am sitting in Maui.
And I'm going to be joining you soon. We have
I
a business retreat coming up, and we circle around with other colleagues. And oh my God, it's so beautiful where you live. And I have to say, you like embody the energy of Hawaii.
Well,
Yeah.
I just moved back here just a little over a year ago. I was in California before
Oh,
that.
we're in
Um,
California.
the Bay Area, kind of
Hmm.
Marin area.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like Hawaii has been a home for a long time since,
Mm.
yeah. So it feels good. It feels good to be here.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely can see you there for sure, as well as the Bay Area. Well, enough of the chitter chatter. I use the word
Uh-huh.
embodiment for a reason. And I would love to share with this woman who you are. Ajaya not only is a friend of mine, a soul sister of mine, she's an amazing practitioner. She's the founder of a unique somatic discovery process called core embodiment, an integrated system of embodiment practices, principles, and perceptual orientations to awaken and align with the power of your human potential. Woof. She is a certified biodynamic craniosacral integration, yes, integration teacher, a NARM practitioner, which is neuroaffective relational model, which addresses developmental trauma, as well as an authorized continuum teacher. So we are going to be diving into some really important work that is important for each and every one of us to tap into. Because what I know is so many of us, if not all of us, have some challenges with connecting with our body and embodiment. And we want to know what core embodiment is. But first, share with us your journey to this work of yours, because like you, after reading all that, I'm like, wow, you've done so much. What led you here?
Thank you, Junie, for that question. On some level, of course, our journeys are so mysterious and inexplicable. But I could say that, I grew up kind of unusually. My parents were Sufi ministers. I grew up in a Sufi community in upstate New York, actually, for a good part of my childhood. I wasn't very much exposed to the dominant culture, private school, very spiritual upbringing. And my mom and my aunts on both sides were all healers. So from a really young age, I was just exposed to touch therapies and obviously steeped in a very spiritual kind of field. And by the time I was 16, I was so bored in high school. I tested out of high school. I went to college. I started studying pre med. I knew I was a healer. I wanted to be a doctor of some kind. I started to go down that path. And by my early 20s, I was just super burned out with medical school and all of that. And I was already doing hands-on work, and I came upon this thing called cranial sacral work, and it was literally like a light switch got turned on. Like suddenly I was seeing the world in full color spectrum, rainbow,
Mm.
and hearing and surround sound. And like I woke up out of this kind of black and white world I was living in. And I realized, wow, I could just choose this. So I dropped out of school and I went all in on that path. And, I don't think I need to get super granular on all the details of my journey, but I can say that I had this fascination from early on, and ongoingly with, what are we and who are we and where do we come from and why are we here and what's the point and what is this being human? And
Mm.
so I would say, like, by the time I was in my early 30s, I started going deeper into studies related to, non-dual orientations of psychotherapy, and really kind of in this question of like, okay, I could have these like transcendent experiences on meditation retreats or in my work, but it was like there was this gap between that and living that in my life, in my personal life.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So I was like, how do I bridge the gap? And that's when I really started getting deep involved with somatic practices and started to discover there was actually tangible locations in our bodies, specifically our hara, our gut brain, our heart brain, and our head brain, that, the Taoist traditions, at that point I was deep into embryology. And so I was starting to connect these dots around our development and then these various traditions that had all gone inside and came out with different maps that were all correlating to the same territory. And that was really in those beginning days, like I was just obsessed with kind of connecting these dots. And eventually it became core embodiment. It became my own synthesis um, of basically like hand holding people, walking them home back into a tangible location inside the core of their own bodies that they could
Oh my
rest.
God. Oh my God. To rest in that. Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's such a powerful story. And I don't know if we discussed this or not, because there's like, before we dive into the core embodiment, it's a similar story, little different. I was like, should I be a doctor or should I be an actress? I was like, well, I can always be a doctor. Let me just go the acting route because I really sucked at chemistry and math. And then I bumped up against, I really wanted to, I hit that rock bottom of like, whoa, something's off. I will do the cliff notes because this is about you and your work. However, I want to say, I went into, deep into yoga, and then I became a massage therapist, and then I became an acupuncturist because I wanted more medicine. And then I had kind of a big shock to my being, my mind, that there was so much going on between my ears that was creating so much of my misery, and it was held in my body. And that's when I found the shadow work, which has people go it's a different way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Similar journey. Here we are, helping people
I'm not
come
surprised.
home, helping people come home. I love it. So tell us about your beautiful core embodiment, and yeah, tell us more about that. What is it?
Well, I gave you a little background that was definitely,
Yeah.
some of those foundational years. But I would say core embodiment really birthed through about, so I had already been, during doing the developmental trauma work, I was already a continuum teacher. I was already a biodynamic cranial teacher. I was already kind of like these transparent layers were growing and building. But about 6 years ago, I actually came to Maui to finish writing a book I was working on. And part of what called me to come to the islands was that I could feel there was a part of me that was like hovering, that wasn't fully in my bond with this earth and my own body and my own intelligence. I could feel where I was kind of in this nervous system entrainment with the culture and the speed of the culture. And at that time, my book was called Growing at the Speed of Love. And I knew that
Oh
for
God. Oh
what
my God.
wanted to come through me, I
Mhm.
had to go to my next level.
Yeah.
So I come to Maui and I spent a lot of time grieving. It's interesting. My cat, who was my biggest, longest attachment relationship at that time of 11 years, had just died. And I felt like when he died, I got this permission slip that I could go to this next level in my own life. And it was like within a week or something, I got this guidance like, go to Maui. I
Ah,
wasn't thinking about it. It was just like directions.
yeah.
So I'm here and I'm in that grief process, and I would just spend time lying on the earth and in this prayer of how do I really go to a deeper level of my bond with this planet.
Mm.
So as that was happening, I started to just this practice started like inventing itself, that initially was horizontal and then it became vertical. And it was this way that I would get out of my own way to get guidance around what I was writing. And I would like do the practice and start taking notes. And then I'd go sit at my computer and I would write for as long as I could. Well, I didn't know it back in those days. I wouldn't have called it flow state, but that's what was happening. I was basically entering into flow, and all this creative access was
Mhm.
happening. So a little while later, I discovered Joe Dispenza's book called Becoming Supernatural.
Yeah, I
And
love
I'm
his.
reading his
I'm
book.
I'm like a huge, huge fan of his. I follow him. I do his meditations. He's my dude, man. So you're reading the
Totally.
book. Oh my God.
So I'm reading his book and I'm thinking, wow, my practice is pretty much the same, only he doesn't add, I work with sounds. We work with sounds. And he doesn't add in touch and he doesn't in sound, but I'm still using the breath retention. I'm still creating a positive, affirmative inner environment. So many similarities. But I'm like, I don't have all the equipment. I don't have all the tests. I can't get all that data. But I'm thinking, it's got to be similar because I could just feel it.
Yeah.
So I start sharing this practice with my students, with my clients. Everyone starts having powerful experiences. Fast forward, I end up doing a short pilot study on the practice where we ran a series of EEGs and it tested super high in flow state and high in coherence. So it was like this, my science geeky part of me loved getting
I
that.
know. Me too. Me too. Me too. And you use the word coherence, and I'm sure there's at least one woman that's listening, going, "What? What was that?" Share a little bit about what that means.
Well, I would like to say that my sort of reframe and definition of coherence is basically when your head, your heart, and your gut are all congruent
Yep.
and you feel congruent, you feel aligned, you feel coherent. You're not thinking one thing, saying one thing, doing another thing, right? You're
Got it.
lined up with yourself.
And would you
Um,
say flow state?
would I say that's true for flow state?
Would you say when you're in flow state, you're in coherence? Would you put the two together?
Yeah. So technically, on the more science definition, flow state is this optimum state of performance where your creative capacity is fully online. You're tapped in, you're fully absorbed
Got it.
in whatever it is you're engaged with.
Right.
Like
Right.
often writing, big wave surfers, mountain climbers, you're fully absorbed, fully engaged in the task.
Mhm.
There's a thing where your challenge skill level, you're on your edge. You're basically like, if it's too challenging, you're overwhelmed. If it's not challenging enough, you're bored. So you want to be in that like sweet spot of on your
Mhm.
edge. You're growing, you're learning in the moment. You're in this state of constant biofeedback, right? Um, and you're in your sort of discovery of your capacity, right? You're like on the spot, learning, growing, discovering what you're capable of. Coherence has more to do with, I mean, there's different ways of talking about it: heart rate variability, heart coherence.
Right.
Um, but it's more of a metric that's defining um, nervous system regulation, where your heart rate, your vagus tone, your, everything is kind of humming in it's like its sweet spot,
Yeah,
right?
no, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, because like with Dr. Joe, he's always talking about that. And as you were talking about you on the ground and connecting to your flow state, and then you mentioned coherence, that's how I feel like when I'm doing his meditations, and that that heart rate variability, sinks in and everything starts to mesh, and I just suddenly get so centered. I feel so open and in the flow. It just kind of makes sense. This is so juicy. This is so juicy. So, anything else you wanted to add before we move on? Because I know we kind of bounced around a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Cool, cool. So, embodiment, flow state, coming home. Connect the dots a little bit about how this work can support a woman that's just opening up to love, maybe love for herself and connecting to herself for the first time, maybe in her whole life, or maybe she's going out there for the first time in many, many years and starting to date and get intimate. What might you offer around the work that you do, and maybe some tips around how to get into flow state? That sounds so juicy.
Sure. Well, I think you would probably resonate and agree with me, Junie, and probably a lot of your listeners, that to really have genuine, intimate connection with another, I think the number one ingredient of that is that you have connection with yourself.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you're in a primary bond with someone, that walk, that journey is going to keep asking you to stay in connection with yourself, because often in relationship is where we start losing ourselves and, withholding our experience or overriding or bypassing or doing all the things we do. So I think the work of embodying your core is a lifelong practice, because having a primary relationship with another requires you have a primary relationship with yourself, and you know how to access, what am I feeling and what are my needs? I think a lot of us, part of the path of core embodiment isn't just a practice and accessing flow, but it's also a developmental journey of reclaiming your relationship with your needs, because a lot of us from early on didn't have our needs met so well, and we're
Yeah.
living out of coping strategies, and right,
Hmm.
so all that gets amplified in relationship.
Oh, yeah. Yes, 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 indeed.
Yeah.
In all the glorious ways. Spirit, God, source, whatever you want to call the smart energy that has created all this, said, let's create relationships so you really can figure this out,
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I like to say, or, a lot of my orientation is that I think we need a tangible location. It's like so many practices are just sort of like in consciousness in some cloud somewhere or something, and that was part of, way back when I was saying bridging the gap. That was where I started to bridge that gap. Is I think I think in the old days, this whole thing around quote awakening or enlightenment, to me, the new word is embodiment, and it's really about being human.
Yeah.
Like that's the new awakening, is actually like becoming our
Oh,
human potential.
let's like stop right there. It's like, yes. I mean, that is like we have all these words and like this is about being human. I say that so often. It's like we have thrown our humanity in shadow. It's like, let's take back our emotions. Let's take back this beautiful journey that we've signed up for in this, yeah, in being human. Oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. Yes, being human. Continue on, dear.
Well, yay, I'm glad you concur.
Yes, well, Michael Franti too, be human. It's like,
Yeah, stay
stay
human.
human. Yeah.
Well, and I think we don't even really know what that is. We don't really even know our potential yet. We're evolving as a species.
Yeah.
And so, back to your question, of love and relating and intimacy, I think it is because a lot of our original wounding and ruptures from splitting from ourselves and having a relationship with our bodies and our bodily wisdom and our heart wisdom and our human wisdom happened in a relational field. Well, a lot of that healing can occur in a relational field. And I think that's part of the evolutionary draw towards relationship and towards love.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the more you've kind of taken the time to get to know you, know thyself, the more you have a whole being to start to bring to meet another. And
100%.
obviously that mirror is going to show you where you don't know you and where you have yet to occupy you.
Always more. Always more. And so true. So true. So this work of flow and embodiment and coming home to our humanity, I'm completely on the same page with you. Uh, is there anything like, where does one begin from your point of view when it comes to connecting to their core so that they can relax and open more?
Well, I mean, I could take a minute or two and give us an experience if you want. My work's very experiential.
Please, that would be
It's
amazing. Please, please,
okay.
please. I
Okay.
love when people offer
Um,
stuff
so
like,
how many minutes would be appropriate right now,
I
just so
mean,
I
look,
orient?
absolutely. How about 5?
Okay. All right.
Cool.
So what I would suggest is that just simply bringing your hands, let's bring a hand to our hara and ideally under your clothes if you can, kind of make that
I'll
skin to
lift my
skin.
dress up. And maybe tell people where the heart is.
So your hara is your like around your navel, your belly center. And so let's just take a moment, and we can even just close the eyes if you're not driving or anything like that.
Ah, doing
And
it
just
right
let,
here with you.
yeah, just let your attention drop and actually receiving your touch on your belly and feeling into you from your hand into your belly. And just let your breath start to land down in that contact. And so, ideally, as you breathe in, your belly expands. And as you exhale, there's a softening the belly in towards the spine. And as we exhale, we can notice any places in the system that might be gripping or some excess unconscious tension, and we can just start to soften. Maybe let out some audible sighs, some ahs, some just letting go breaths.
Mm.
Yeah, and oftentimes as we start to descend with our attention and our breath deepens lower in the body, we notice we're actually being held right now by a chair that's held by a floor there's some earth somewhere down there. So let yourself also just drop into this sensation of being supported right now, that the earth is rising up to meet you, that you're supported. You can drop your weight and really let yourself be held. And just giving a wave of gratitude to the earth below and all around, all the ways we're supported and guided and nourished and cared for, this beautiful Mother Earth. And I like to think of it like a root system or an umbilical cord that just starts to relax back down into a sweet spot of our own belonging here. We all have a place to belong here because we're here. So as you feel your breath in your belly, just letting your root system kind of drop down. Generous in breaths, generous out breaths. And let's bring the other hand to our hearts. And just again, receiving your touch, feeling you here. Saying hello to our beautiful hearts. And we'll just take a few seconds and we'll make a humming sound together, just as a way to vibrate our particular sound frequency between our two hands and inviting this channel between our belly and our hearts to just be more fully felt. This is really, when I say being home in ourselves, this is our primary seat right here in the core. So just a gentle humming sound, something like this. Take a deep breath in. And do that with me. Just take a deep breath in, and then the humming is happening on the exhale. And let's do that one more time, and just feeling your sound, feeling your touch, feeling that internal vibration, being right there with you.
Mm.
Yeah, and then just let the next in breath come in and kind of let that space inside fill up a little bit more. You can let your hands relax and let's just take a moment just to feel kind of those reverberations that just moved through our bodies, our minds, our hearts. Perhaps we feel a little more space inside and a little more contact as well. Perhaps the thinking mind is a little more background and the feeling body a little more foreground. Perhaps there's more breath capacity, like we can actually breathe a little deeper and fuller. Great. So let's go ahead and gently start to come back. Let's just rub our hands together, generate a little heat. Maybe just bring a little touch anywhere it feels good.
That was a really sweet few minutes to like just be and come home. I still feel the buzz throughout my whole body. And even just for those of you hearing me on audio and those of you seeing, it's like you could hear my voice is different. I'm just more so so even more present. I always love to be present for my guests. I'm even that much more present and connected, not only to myself, but to you right now. So
Yeah.
I can just imagine a full practice of this on a regular basis. I have my ways in adding this in and your beautiful work, how this leads to such a deeper connection to ourselves and others. So beautiful. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think just thank you for that opportunity to share a little taste.
Sure, sure. And
Yeah.
you mentioned hearts, and I must ask, tell me what hearts means, because typically we say, put your hand on your heart.
I think I just was imagining we're in a field right now with many hearts.
Ah, so we're all holding our hearts. Get it, get
Yes.
it. I'm like, ooh, what does she mean by that? Oh gosh, that was so precious, so precious. So I do want to ask one more question before you share your wonderful, amazing gift. Boom, boom, boom. Um, Tell us how you view flow state in relationship to impacting the world in a positive way.
Thank you, Junie. I love that question. Well, what's really interesting, so after I had that pilot study done, that was in 2021. And since I'm kind of, it sounds like you are too, I'm a little bit of like a psychobiology geek. I love studying and researching and learning things. And
Yeah.
so I've really been going down the rabbit hole, not only through my own experience of flow, but really studying some of more of the neurobiology. And one of the interesting things is that they're finding the flow state is actually a powerful way for trauma healing. Things like PTSD, attention deficit disorders. So my feeling is that, and just even the background of how flow state originated was a man named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who came out of Hungary. He was a psychotherapist, and he really was studying like what makes people happy, what makes people find meaning in life, what makes people want to live, because he was alive during the war and he noticed that people had a really hard time coming back to life. So that was really, the study behind flow is he noticed that people who were highly creative, who were what they call in the zone more often, were happier people. And
Uh-huh.
and so I think, in my work, it's like I take them through a reclamation of their developmental journey and through their central access. But eventually we get to a point where it's like really ultimately our healing is making medicine of all of our traumas, our pain, our wounding, our story is our blessing. And
Yeah.
so I think flow state is this way of the ultimate creative act of being so all in, whatever it is, whatever you love. Um, and that when we spend more time being all in, fully absorbed in whatever we love, we're happier people. You know, we're creative people who are actually, bringing to bear on the challenges of our time more innovation, more creativity, more resolution, because we're showing up, we're bringing our presence.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I think it's this interesting way where like the old psychology was really focusing on what was wrong, what was deficient, what was the story, how do we get to the root? And I'm all for, let's there's a place for that. There's a time for that, but eventually the natural development, I think, of the healing journey is you get to a point where you want to give back. and you want to share your medicine, and your
Mm.
medicine is your journey.
Yeah. That famous saying I hear all the time, your mess is your message. And I love how you say it about, you know, taking our journey and giving it as medicine. Because we have walked through our own PhD of life. And I haven't done a lot of work just yet around grief. I tell people that that's coming. Some of the processes that I do in shadow work, my favorite processes are the grief processes. And that's been my PhD in life, is
Mm.
grief with all the different losses. And of course, I bring that aspect in, but more than anything, I bring in, my medicine of living to the fullest because of what I've experienced of loss in my life. And so, yes, my mess of that has brought me to where I am. And may we all heal. May we all come home and do the work that we need to do so that we can show up for others. And it does start with this work. And your work is so
Mhm.
precious. Your
Mm.
work is so precious. And you are so precious. You're
No.
so meant to be doing this work. Oh my God. So you
Thank
have a
you, Junie.
wonderful gift, flow-based leadership checklist. Tell us what that is, and then we'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, it was just one of my little creative babies. They're basically 11 flow state hacks,
Nice.
that if you want to be living your life to the fullest with the most vitality and impact and inspiration, these hacks, I think part of my little lean with the flow state is different than some people. And then on that list, I talk a lot about boundaries, um, self care, being honest, being authentic. I mean, we didn't go a lot into that, but that's really the number one flow blocker. Is it if
You'll
you're
just have
being
to come back, sister.
okay?
Talk
So,
about all
anyways,
this.
they're kind of more, I would say, psycho spiritual somatic flow state
Nice.
hacks than what
Nice.
you might normally think of. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I totally encourage you, soul sister, who's listening and watching, to grab that. That sounds amazing. Who doesn't need some good hacks around this for sure? Anything else you wanted to add before we close this super special episode today?
Just thank you, Junie. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you. And thank
Mm,
you for who you are and for your journey and your medicine. And thank you to all of you who are listening for your journey.
mm.
It's like everything we've gone through, everything we've lived and died through is what allows us to be here today and to be who we are. And
Ah,
there's great honor and dignity in that.
oh my gosh. Absolutely. Absolutely. So beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you
My
so
pleasure.
much.
My
Yes.
pleasure.
And Soul Sister, that is our episode for today. I hope you breathed with us. If you haven't, maybe go back and do it. It was really delicious. Grab her checklist. And if you haven't subscribed or liked the channel, please do write some comments. I would love to hear your comments, ask questions, and come home. Come home to who you are, to your heart with a one T, and know that there are many hearts that are doing it with you. And until we meet again, mwah.
Mwah.